first game of D&D that I ever played was Curse of Strahd in 5th edition. Now, I was expecting like a whimsical, fantastical setting for my ice evocation wizard, and what I did not know was that my dungeon master was highly inspired by Gothic horror and the video game Darkest Dungeons, if you've ever heard of that before. And so it was a landscape of dark desolation and despair. And it was not at all what I was expecting. The campaign took place over several years in real-world time, I think 3 years total, and it spanned from levels 1 to 20, so it was a slightly homebrewed version of Curse of Strahd, for those of you familiar with how the game works. And I'm not going to lie, Victor, the character who I played in that game, has a special place in my heart. He shows up as an NPC in all of my Dungeons & Dragons games, usually as a strange, if not helpful, very powerful mage. And in every game that he appears in, he is a highly war-torn individual from his time spent in the Shadowfell and Barovia. And if you're confused on what's Barovia or the Shadowfell, or if you hear Ravenloft or Curse of Strahd, don't worry, I'll break that down in this video. Obviously, spoilers for Curse of Strahd will be ahead. And additionally, I regret to inform you, should you continue watching this video, you will face increasing despair. So, grab onto your lantern and hold onto your light, because we delve into the darkness ahead. The Shadowfell, a term that may conjure up images of mysterious darkness, is a critical concept within the fantastical universe of Dungeons & Dragons. In 4th edition, the Shadowfell appeared as an echo of the material plane. It represented a dark, gloomy parallel universe, a place of decay, shadows, and death. The purpose of this plane was to provide a stark contrast to the vibrant and whimsical Feywild, the other echo of the material plane. And if you're interested in the Feywild, I have a pretty cool video that I did not too long ago about the Feywild. I'll link it in the doobly-doo and around here. The Shadowfell also offers an intriguing and dangerous new environment for players to explore, filled with unique challenges, creatures, and story opportunities. But before there was the Shadowfell, there was Ravenloft. Now, the relationship between Ravenloft and the Shadowfell is interesting. Tracy and Laura Hickman wrote Ravenloft, and it was published in a D&D adventure module, D&D I6 Ravenloft, in 1983 by TSR. And the adventure module was so popular that it was developed into a full setting in 1990, known as Ravenloft Realm of Terror, or just Ravenloft for short. The setting is heavily influenced by Gothic horror and draws much inspiration from stories like Bram Stoker's Dracula and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's a realm of eerie and mysterious landscapes cloaked in a perpetual twilight, where haunted castles perch on craggy hillsides and werewolves prowl shadowy forests. The name Ravenloft is taken from Castle Ravenloft, the home of the central Dark Lord of the setting, Strahd Von Zarovich, the vampire ruler of the domain of Barovia. Strahd is a tragic figure, having become a vampire in a failed attempt to claim the woman he loved, and he is eternally tormented by her loss. Though that is what canon tells us, we'll get into some of the criticisms of Strahd later in this video. And with the advent of 4th edition, Ravenloft was integrated into the Shadowfell, and in 5th edition it was revealed within the Curse of Strahd adventure. So Ravenloft was this horror-themed adventure module and setting, and eventually that kind of went under the umbrella of the Shadowfell, which is like this plane of existence in the D&D cosmology. In essence, the Shadowfell allowed Ravenloft to become part of the D&D cosmology instead of being its own very separate niche demiplane. This also made it easier for DMs to integrate a horror setting into pretty much any adventure they want to. But you know what is truly terrifying, more so than Ravenloft and the Shadowfell, is the less than 5% of the people who watch my videos are subscribed, so please hit like and subscribe. I'm begging you. The Shadowfell is highly influenced by Gothic horror, which really started to emerge more in the late 1800s, where it featured things like supernatural beings, highly tragic figures, monsters. Fear became a really big staple to this genre. And with books like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Bram Stoker's Dracula, those are obvious inspirations for the setting of Ravenloft and the Shadowfell. In Gothic settings, the past is often a source of the supernatural. The castles and mansions in these stories are often cursed or haunted because of some past evil or tragedy. Similarly, the Shadowfell is home to many places scarred by ancient curses and haunted by spectral beings. Additionally, in Gothic horror, supernatural beings are teeming in these stories. For instance, Bram Stoker's Dracula and the ghostly apparitions that haunt M.R. James's stories. The Shadowfell in D&D is no different. It's home to a variety of supernatural creatures, such as ghosts, wraiths, and vampires, including the most infamous vampire, the Dark Lord, Strahd Von Zarovich. A sense of impending doom, melancholy, and the macabre is another key characteristic of Gothic literature. Edgar Allan Poe's works, for instance, often feature this element. The Shadowfell embodies this aspect of Gothic horror in its entirety. It's a realm where light is scarce and death and decay are everywhere. The Shadowfell is composed of several key features or characteristics that make it very unique in the D&D cosmology. Number one, it's a dark reflection or a dark mirror of reality. It reflects the material plane in a sense, but at the same time it twists all of its appearances into something much more dark and disturbing. Its geography becomes grotesque caricature of the material plane, mimicking its features but transforming them into ghastly shadow-infused versions of themselves. This mirroring property is also shared with the Feywild, another parallel plane, but where the Feywild magnifies the beauty and fantastical elements of the material plane, the Shadowfell enhances its grim aspects to a harrowing degree. Forests become skeletal mockeries of trees, mountains look like vast tombstones, and oceans stagnate into pools of inky blackness, exuding a palpable sense of decay and death. The realm pulses with a constant reminder of mortality, as everything within it seems to be in a state of dying or already dead, emphasizing its role as a plane where decay is not only a recurring theme, but an intrinsic characteristic. And these physical features are only further amplified by the innate emotional features of darkness and decay. Characters who find themselves in the Shadowfell will feel this burden of heaviness, dread wash over them. It's not uncommon for characters who find themselves in the Shadowfell for too long to become mad or crazy. Even the most stalwart adventurers may lose their will to live. This emotional desolation forms an essential part of the plane's character, serving as a grim reminder of the psychological perils that work within the Shadowfell's gloomy landscapes. For those who dare to venture into its depths, the Shadowfell is more than a physical journey into a land of shadow and decay. It is a test of mental endurance and a voyage into the darker corners of the soul. The Shadowfell is also composed of many domains of dread, each individual demiplane ruled by a Dark Lord. Now, this was originally part of the Ravenloft setting. It was brought over, and I'm really glad that they brought it over, because it's one of the most unique aspects of the Shadowfell. And it's actually so expansive and so interesting and integral to the Shadowfell, we'll have a whole section carved out for the domains of dread later. Another key feature of the Shadowfell is necrotic power or necrotic energy and the negative energy plane. This power and energy is literally the manifestation of darkness, decay, and death. Necrotic energy is one of the fundamental forces in the D&D cosmology. The energy is composed of a mysterious darkness and serves as an opposite to radiant energy, which is associated with life and light. And in the context of the Shadowfell, necrotic energy is particularly potent. The plane itself is suffused with necrotic energy, making spells and abilities that use it more powerful. Undead beings animated by necrotic energy are more common in the Shadowfell. The necrotic energy that encapsulates the Shadowfell is actually fueled by the plane of negative energy. According to Invictus Nox on RPG Stack Exchange, the negative energy plane, sometimes called the plane of death or the negative material plane, was an inner plane or energy plane of the Great Wheel cosmology and the World Tree cosmology models. After the Spell Plague, the negative energy plane collapsed into the elemental chaos, mixing with all the other inner planes. The goddess Shar managed to channel some of this death energy into the plane of shadow and create the Shadowfell. Cosmologists believe that negative energy and its opposite, positive energy, combined with the four elements, make up the known universe. Let's talk about the Shadar-Kai, or Shadar-Kai, I don't really know how you say it. The Shadar-Kai are one of the most prominent inhabitants of the Dark Plane. They're typically known as the Shadowfell Elves, and it's thought that many years ago they were lured into the Demiplane by the Raven Queen. Over countless centuries, these denizens of the gloom have developed a complex relationship with their shadowy realm and its reigning deity, the Raven Queen. Initially, the Shadar-Kai shared the Fey origin with their elven brethren, their existence intertwined with the vibrancy and whimsicality of the Fey life. However, an inevitable transformation occurred upon their migration to the Shadowfell, an evolution born out of survival and adaptation to the plane's bleak, desolate energies. Now, the Shadar-Kai teeter precariously on the borderline of existence, inhabiting an eerie state that oscillates between life and death. An embodiment of their grim homeland, the Shadar-Kai exhibit stark ashen skin tones, a clear divergence from their initial Fey appearance. This physical metamorphosis is more pronounced during their stay in the Shadowfell, as their features turn increasingly wizened, echoing the somber and melancholic ambience of this gloomy plane. Through the ebb and flow of time, Shadar-Kai have weakened the tether between themselves and the Shadowfell, and many have ventured outwards into the material plane and all of the planes in the D&D cosmology. Though no matter where they go, they cannot shake the sense of connection that they have to the darkness, to the Shadowfell itself, and perhaps most importantly, the Raven Queen. The Shadowfell also serves as the prime domain of the Raven Queen, the D&D goddess of fate, death, and winter. She resides in the Shadowfell within her fortress known as the Fortress of Memories. Her fortress is an imposing citadel crafted from ice and obsidian, and it stands as a testament to her power and influence. She's a figure draped in mystery as dark as her realm. She's one of the most captivating entities in D&D. She was once a mortal queen who transcended her mortal coil and is now the goddess of death and fate. The Raven Queen is not a traditional deity in the D&D cosmology. She's very unique, and her power and dominion is over a very specific part of the life process, specifically the moment of death itself. She does not extend into the afterlife, yet she is that blink, that last breath, the very last moment of life turned to death, a twilight, if you will. She guards that line between life and death so fiercely, and she seeks out punishment for anybody who would pervert that line. So obviously, with liches trying to extend their lifetime, she's not a fan. No, she's not. She doesn't like that. She also has a hand in fate, but her machinations and her thoughts are so imperceivable and unknowable to mortals, most do not understand the role that she plays in destiny. In her Fortress of Memories, the Raven Queen collects and stores the memories of every being in their time of death, an eternal repository of final thoughts and experiences. It's said that the fortress is filled with thousands upon thousands of mirrors, each one representing a mortal life. These mirrors capture and display the final moments and thoughts of every life, a moving tribute to the fragility and fleetingness of mortal existence. Another interesting connection to the Raven Queen is her relationship with ravens. They serve as her messengers, her spies, and even aspects of her herself. It's said that a raven's caw can carry her messages, and to harm one is to incur her wrath. These creatures embody her presence within the Shadowfell and beyond, a constant reminder of her silent vigil over life's end. Adding another layer of enigma to the Raven Queen is the fact that she always keeps her face concealed with a porcelain mask, unmoving and unemotional, such as the Shadowfell itself. It's become iconic to her character, a part of her persona showing her stoicness in her duties as a goddess. This mystifying aspect intensifies the aura of intrigue that surrounds her. As a result, the Raven Queen's true countenance remains subject of speculation and reverence, an unfathomable mystery hidden behind the impassive, hauntingly beautiful facade of her porcelain mask. Despite her seemingly somber role, the Raven Queen is not technically an evil deity. She is one of duty, serving very consistently and loyally at her post, and she is worshipped by some people in the D&D cosmology. However, she's not universally recognized, and there are many cultures who would consider worship to the Raven Queen as heretical worship. Because she is such a recent god, she's not really been accepted into the wider and more accepted pantheon. The mists themselves that surround each of the demi-planes kind of serve as this invisible barrier, making free travel into and out of the Shadowfell enigmatic, if not impossible. Journeying through the mists and through the Shadowfell is dangerous and perilous, and one will find themselves starting in one place and reappearing back where they started after hours and hours of travel. Traveling within the Shadowfell usually requires some expert guidance, magical assistance, or in-depth knowledge of the plane's idiosyncrasies. Some adventurers, for example, use something called shadow crossings. These are rare, naturally occurring phenomena that serve as portals between the Shadowfell and the material plane. They're often found in places marked by darkness, decay, or death. These crossroads exist where the barrier between realities is at its thinnest, appearing unpredictably under specific conditions or at recurrent times. Escaping from the Shadowfell, and especially from the Domains of Dread, is highly complex. Each domain is essentially a self-contained prison for a Dark Lord, enveloped by the insidious mists of Ravenloft. The mists that surround all of the Shadowfell are meant to be these inescapable barriers for individuals who are traveling, and only a very specific group of people, the Vistani, seem to be able to use the mists as they want. The mists serve as kind of this enigmatic cage that surrounds all of the different domains of dread within the Shadowfell, making travel virtually impossible. However, the Vistani people are able to travel pretty much freely. These nomadic people, who travel in colorful caravans and are known for their ability to foretell the future, have somehow acquired the ability to move more freely between the realms. Their secrets remain closely guarded, leaving the exact nature of their freedom a mystery. Despite the daunting reputation of the Shadowfell, stories persist of those who have managed to escape. There are many tales of adventurers who have escaped the clutches of the Shadowfell through cunning, research, or just sheer force of will, and that is a major part of the Curse of Strahd. Rumors speak of powerful artifacts, divine intervention, or of elaborate rituals that could possibly pierce the misty veil, although the specifics are cloaked in obscurity. However, anyone who ventures into the Shadowfell, even if they escape, they are going to be permanently marked by the Shadowfell's darkness and despair through fear, shadows that follow them, lingering memories, or a haunted past, even madness that just overtakes them. And now, for anyone who is familiar with D&D, you have probably heard of one name, and that is Strahd Von Zarovich. Strahd Von Zarovich was born into a noble family within Barovia, one of the domains of dread within the Shadowfell. He was a respected military general known for his tactical prowess and leadership abilities. Strahd's ambition and desire for power led him to conquer and rule over Barovia, establishing himself as its ruler. Despite his successes, Strahd's life took a tragic turn when he encountered Tatiana, a young woman who he believed to be his true love. Tatiana, however, was already betrothed to Strahd's younger brother, Sergei. Consumed by jealousy and desire, Strahd made a pact with dark forces, hoping to win Tatiana's affections. On the day of Sergei's and Tatiana's wedding, Strahd's jealousy reached its peak. Filled with rage and driven by his desire for Tatiana, he murdered his brother. Tatiana, horrified by his act of violence, fled from Strahd and threw herself off the castle's ramparts. In her death, Strahd was cursed, forever tormented by his actions and doomed to roam the land of Barovia as an immortal vampire. The curse bound Strahd to his castle Ravenloft, where he would now spend his eternity, doomed and linked to the castle by some mysterious force. And eventually his thirst for power became a thirst for blood. And over time he began terrorizing the people of Barovia, manipulating them and ruling over them with an iron fist. Strahd's curse went beyond just his confinement into Castle Ravenloft, but rather became a confinement into Barovia itself, with the mists serving as the jail bars and Barovia itself becoming the prison. He and all the inhabitants were trapped together in this never-ending cycle of torment. Throughout the years, various adventurers have been drawn to Barovia, their destinies intertwined with Strahd's curse. They're often lured into Castle Ravenloft, where they must face the formidable vampire lord and either find their way to free Barovia or succumb to its darkness. Strahd, forever haunted by his past and his unrequited love for Tatiana, seeks release from his curse. His interactions with adventurers who challenge him vary, as he alternates between manipulative charm and ruthless cruelty. His dark nature and thirst for power often overshadow any glimpses of vulnerability or remorse. The ultimate fate of Strahd Von Zarovich lies in the hands of the adventurers who dare to face him, their actions shaping the outcome of his eternal struggle. While many fans appreciate the complexity of Strahd Von Zarovich, there's a lot of criticism of his character as well. While it's obvious that Strahd is the villain and the bad guy, in some ways he's written to almost be a sympathetic character, but it just comes off as a very pathetic way of writing him. He is tortured and tragic, yes, but more so, he is pathetic. His obsession was supposed to be shown as this passion, but rather it just kind of makes him look like a sad boy who is jealous of his brother and unable to get a girl to like him. Again, he is supposed to be the villain, so I'm not saying that It's not a bad thing that they wrote him as a villainous character. I'm saying that it is often criticized that he's made to seem sympathetic, but when you look at his character and his character's choices, he really doesn't seem that sympathetic. It's just kind of like a disparate way of writing him. But Strahd aside, let's talk about the confinements of the Dark Lords, such as Strahd, namely the Domains of Dread. As I stated previously, the Domains of Dread serve as individualized prisons for Dark Lords. They are essentially subplanes or demiplanes within the Shadowfell. If the ocean is the D&D cosmology, the Shadowfell would be an island, and the Domains of Dread would be houses on that island. Every Domain of Dread is unique, crafted to reflect the psyche, backstory, and sins of its resident Dark Lord. This could range from haunted forests to cursed castles to dystopian cities or seemingly idyllic landscapes that hide sinister secrets. Each domain is not just a physical representation of the Dark Lord's past transgressions, but also an embodiment of their own personal hell. A Dark Lord is typically a being or a person who committed serious, grievous sins within their lifetime, and throughout their existence, the Dark Powers took recognition of them and created them into a Dark Lord. The Dark Powers craft a domain specifically for the Dark Lord, often based on places, people, and things that were significant in their lives and their path into becoming what they are. The enigmatic architects, the Dark Powers, have birthed the Domains of Dread. They preside over the Shadowfell as a whole, influencing the course of events and periodically reaching into other planes to gather heroes and villains for their ghastly collection. Their intentions are shrouded in mystery. The Dark Powers are not in the shadows. They are the shadows. The Dark Powers are these strange, enigmatic forces that bend everything within the Shadowfell. They are the unseen jailers of the Dark Lords, and they are essentially these strange deities specific to the Shadowfell, but they are unknown to all mortals. Despite their power within the Shadowfell, they remain fairly detached from the planes that they masterfully manipulate. Vague names like Osibas, Shami, or Marai, the Tenebros, surface in dark tales. Yet the domain's inhabitants possess minimal knowledge about these dark powers. Some Dark Lords have become aware of their confinement by these antagonistic entities, but discussions about the dark powers are confined to seers, fanatical academics, and beings from beyond our realm. For the residents of the Domains of Dread, ignorance serves as a robust shield against the incomprehensible truth. The dark powers confine the Dark Lords. That all being said, the Dark Lords are both prisoner and master within their domain. They have extraordinary power and yet can never escape their prison. Boundaries are always closed to them. If they try to leave, they will find themselves looped back into their domain, forever trapped in the nightmarish world crafted by their own evil deeds. To make their torment worse, the Dark Powers often include each domain elements of the Dark Lord's past which cause them emotional pain or frustration. This might be an object of their unrequited love, a reminder from their fall of grace, or victims of their tyranny whom they can never truly control. The Domains of Dread kind of serve as this universal justice that is brought upon the truly evil people of the D&D universe. They turn perpetrators' crimes back on them, imprisoning them in a world of their own making, which there is no escape. Now that I think about it, that would actually be a really cool next campaign for D&D characters. Like, let's say the D&D characters all defeat the BBEG, and then the players and the DM start the next campaign, and they are within the Domain of Dread that bad guy now inhabits as a Dark Lord. That one's for free. You can have it. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of my favorite Domains of Dread. Now, there are probably infinite Domains of Dread, but there are some that are outlined in the book Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, and let me just say, it is one of my favorite books in D&D 5th edition. If you do not have that book, I totally recommend it. If you only buy a couple D&D books in a year, buy that one. It is full of so much interesting adventure lore and just worlds for your players to be terrified in. Anyways, here are 5 of my favorite Domains of Dread from the book. The first one I'm going to talk about is Bluetspur. I don't know if that's how you say it, but essentially it's characterized by its very alien, strange landscapes. It's very Geiger-esque in a way, obviously inspired by eldritch horror and Lovecraft. Hanging ominously over the landscape is a dying red orb. To survive this harsh environment, the masters of Bluetspur dwell beneath the surface in a sprawling metropolis laboratory. The denizens of Bluetspur are illithids and other aberration creatures that all serve a god brain, essentially a seriously powerful elder brain. And as it becomes older and dying more and more, the Illithids and their ilk are all serving this elder brain more and more, trying to keep it alive. And its decisions are becoming increasingly irrational. And through trying to keep it alive, they will reach into other planes to steal citizens from the material plane and surrounding planes in order to feed and kind of fuel their quest in order to keep their deity alive. These abductees often return with psychic scars, while others disappear entirely. A few unlucky ones are set on strange paths that lead them back to Bluetspur, only to discover they've been there before. Bluetspur is unimaginable to you and I. It is created of non-Euclidean geometry and created of strange and organic structures and things and beings that would drive us mad. The next domain I want to talk about is Tepest. Tepest is a deceivingly beautiful domain covered in beautiful golden fields and seemingly happy residents. Yet beneath the facade of this pastoral paradise lies a realm fraught with fear and manipulation. The villagers are under the care of Mother Lorinda, an ancient hag who betrayed her coven to attain the love of a daughter. Assuming the guise of a deity known as Mother, she has taken the entire village of Victal under her wing, shielding its inhabitants from nature's harshness and to sustain her cursed offspring. But in the underbelly of this domain are the scheming Fae. These creatures offer cruel bargains to those who stray from Mother's protective gaze, adding an element of terror and uncertainty. The residents of Victal, the last surviving community of Tepest, cling to the tradition of faith to cope with their fear of the wilds and their involvement in a gruesome cycle of ritualistic murder. To these villagers, strangers represent hope. They may bring a chance for a terror-free life or serve as sacrifices in the next necessary slaughter. Tepest essentially embodies folk horror, and it really gives me a lot of midsummer vibes. Tepest embodies a lot of elements of classic horror, such as secret ancient curses, ritualistic sacrifices, and a stark contrast between idyllic rural life and a dark underbelly. Dementlieu is one of my favorite domains of dread within Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, and I will not be able to pronounce any of the proper nouns within this setting because they're all in French. At first glance, it's a paradise for the upper crust, with extravagant balls, fashion, and jewelry, the epitome of which is the Grand Masquerade hosted by Duchess Cedra Donner every 7th day. However, beneath this dazzling facade, Dementlieu is a domain of grotesque delusions and fear. The city of Port-de-Lucine, sprawling between the murky waters of Pernault Bay and Lucine Bay, is the heart of the domain. Here, residents strain to maintain the illusion of opulence, even as the city rots and decays beneath them. The poorest scavenge to maintain middle-class appearance, the actual middle class pretend to be aristocracy, and the true aristocrats are reduced to just one, the Dark Lord Duchess Donner. Any who fail to maintain their facade meet grim fates, with some falling prey to the Red Death, a mysterious spirit embodied by Duchess Cedra. Dementlieu is all about people who are holding on to a desperate sense of delusion. It is really interesting. I actually featured an adventure there for my D&D game, and Duchess Donner is able to essentially snap and disintegrate people on her whim. It is a place that is full of imposter syndrome and the immense fear of being unmasked for what one truly is. Icath is a domain split between two realities, one of dreams and one of the real world. The city's populace is trapped within a perpetual state of dreams, ruled by Dark Lord Xian Chang. The dream world is a place of ceaseless toil, where the denizens strive tirelessly to fulfill Xian Chang's vision of the impossible, a perfect city. It is a golden city of ultimate beauty and efficiency, where all things move according to her design. Despite its apparent splendor, it is a nightmare of inescapable labor for the inhabitants, and death becomes the sole means of escaping this relentless drudgery. And that's within the dreaming world of Icath. Within the waking world, it is a stark contrast. The city's real streets are a labyrinth of decrepit, moldy homes stretching along endless, coiling avenues. The city center is dominated by the infamous Palace of Bones and the gold-scaled Ping-On Tower. By day, the city's few wakeful residents scurry about, scavenging what they can to survive the oncoming night. As twilight falls, Xian Chang's ascends on the Ping Tower to toll the nightingale bell. This ritual not only maintains her dream world's magic, but also summons Icath's undead ancestors, the Zhangxi, to reshape the city's maze-like streets according to her vision. While the Jiangshi carefully avoid the sleeping citizens, they prey upon any wakeful souls they encounter. Anyone who is transported into Xianchang's world of Ikath is in for a boatload of trouble, because if they stay awake, then they must face the horrors and scarcity of the day, as well as the monsters that come and prey on the waking denizens. Or do they let themselves succumb to sleep to face the terrifying dreams that await them in the night? Ikath encapsulates dreams of illusion versus reality, forced perception, and the haunting dichotomy of beauty and dread. Its inspiration likely draws from Chinese folklore and mythology, particularly in the use of Jiangshi, the Chinese hopping vampires, and the concept of a ruler controlling her subjects through dreams reminiscent of dream manipulation found in various mythologies. Next, we're going to talk about Borca. Borca is interesting. It kind of serves as a very political intrigue sense of horror, a lot of psychological horror, a lot of kind of strangeness rooted in the rich and wealthy aristocracy. In this land of treachery and betrayal, the nobility ensnare commoners in a complex web of manipulations. For the ordinary folk, life in Borca is a constant struggle between poverty, crime, and starvation, while the aristocrats revel in power games and cruel entertainments, exploiting their lesser subjects as disposable pawns. The two Dark Lords of Borca, Ivana Boritsi and Ivan Deliznia, embody the domain's hallmarks of deceit and disregard for the masses. Ivana is a genius poisoner, using her deadly concoctions as a tool of control and retribution. Ivan, on the other hand, is a madman and a tinkerer, causing wretched despair. In Borca, power and treachery go hand in hand, and every step towards the next level in power comes with the next stabbing in somebody else's back. One more time, if you're looking for good horror, get Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. It's super great. By diving into the depths of horror and darkness, we create a stark contrast that better helps us appreciate the light and good in the world. The presence of darkness helps delineate and define the light. Fear can often be used to showcase a person's genuine strength and courage that comes within their inner resilience. Darkness is present. There is no arguing that. Many people, unfortunately, face horrors every day. However, in the darkest narratives, there is always a thread of hope. Otherwise, you would probably not read or watch anything horror related. I think it's an important reminder of the power of hope that lies within our own lives, as long as there is that thread that remains. At the beginning of this video, I told you a little bit about my icification wizard, Victor, and he holds a very special place in my heart. However, during the campaign of Curse of Strahd, he became under the control of Strahd himself, and so I had to play another character. And I decided to play Emeric, the cleric of Lathander. Emeric was an anomaly, a werebear, and devoted cleric of Lathander, the god of the dawn. Amidst the pervasive gloom of Barovia, Emeric stood out, virtually immune to the desolation surrounding him. To him, the anguish and despair of the world were not chains binding him, but they were a challenge to overcome. He saw every tragedy as an opportunity, a call to rise above, to conquer the darkness with resolute faith. His unwavering optimism, even when countered by seemingly insurmountable odds, became a beacon of hope for his companions. But calamity struck in the form of a lethal ambush by one of Strahd's menacing Death Knights, and Emeric chose sacrifice. He stared unblinkingly into the face of death, a bulwark defending his friends, enabling their escape. His physical form was captured and unfortunately reanimated. Now used as a puppet by the Death Knight, the Death Knight used Emeric's remains to enact evil on his previous friends. His body was a shell wearing his face and the voice of their beloved ally. It served as a chilling spectacle for his friends to endure, and eventually they had to slay his visage. In the climactic confrontation against Strahd, Emeric's essence was liberated. Reborn as an avatar of Lathander, empowered by his holy might, mace aloft, he fought valiantly beside his allies, and together they banished the Dark Lord. In the wake of this victory, he emerged under a new mantle, Saint Emeric, the Gift of the Dawn. Emeric's legacy extends beyond this epic tale, as he continues to serve as a trusted NPC in my games. Having been delivered from Barovia, he now presides over a temple dedicated to his deity. Time has aged him, robbing him of his sight, but his werebear strength and acute senses still allow him to faithfully serve his flock. Horror tends to highlight the dark corners that exist in our universe, yet within its grim depiction, it invariably demonstrates the insurmountable light that resides underneath. Even in the darkest situations, champions of light triumph in goodness.